beginning now. Thank you. Thank you, Annalyn. Again, my name is Sean Collins with the Energy Project. Welcome to the workshop here today. We're going to have a list of presenters, beginning with Amy Burke from Bonneville Power Administration to provide an overview of the BPA funds for energy efficiency that can be used to serve low-income populations. We'll then have an overview of Section 12 by Sarah Vorpal from Department of Commerce, and some Q&A after that. And then we will have a presentation by Tom Bernard from the State Auditor's Office about their approach to auditing for the Clean Energy Transformation Act. After that, we will have an overview of collaboration between City of Ellensburg with Buddy Stanovich and Andrew Lyons from Hope Source, who will be talking about their partnership in delivering bill assistance as well as low-income weatherization programs. And then followed by a presentation by Kyle White from Opportunity Council, as well as from Lindsay Gross from Opalco, Orcas Power and Light Cooperative, about their hybrid approach to delivering bill assistance and low-income weatherization. We'll have Q&A after each section and encourage a robust conversation among folks. We may not need the entire time until 4 o'clock. I went ahead and scheduled it that late just in case we had a lot of material that we wanted to cover. And I think I switched the introductions here, but we're going to go ahead and start off with Amy Burke from BPA, followed by Tom from the State Auditor's Office, and then Sarah is how actually scratch that, I'm misreading this. We're going to start off with Sarah Vorpal, and without any further ado, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Sarah. Please go ahead.
Great, thanks, Sean, and thanks everyone for being here. I'm happy we have this chance to be all together to talk about this work, this very important work in the state. And I also want to start off with just sharing a lot of gratitude for so many on this call that have been in touch and have been supporting my aspect of this work in terms of the technical advisory groups and just asking a lot of thoughtful questions and helping us, get this kind of brand new chunk of thing off the ground, because it is a huge effort. So bear with me here. I'm going to share a very short presentation just to kind of talk through an overview of what the requirements actually are from Commerce's perspective for the COUs. But then I also want to take a minute to actually just show you our websites and show you where some of this stuff will be housed, because I know sometimes finding the resources can be a challenge. So hopefully we can get some good information shared today. Okay, so let's start with this presentation. Okay. And apologies because I can't see the chat. So if there are questions, if one of the hosts could shout them out for me, or I can take a look once I'm done presenting. During the Q&A, I think is when we have that time. Okay, so, oops, and this is not even the beginning of my presentation. Apologies. Oops. Okay, so I'm here today to talk about what I call Section 12 of CETA, or it's actually the Low Income Energy Assistance Program work that is directed to both the UTC and Commerce under the Clean Energy Transformation Act. So the RCW reference is right there. It's 120 is what it ends up coming out to in the RCW. And, again, just noting that this work for the COUs, it's kind of well housed in terms of data collection and understanding, kind of the broader policy aspects, because we really do focus on a whole cross-section of different topics at Commerce. So just to start with some of the important dates as a function of the different sections. So y'all might remember way back when last year, we did a data collection from the utilities as part of Section 3B. So that was completed in November. The data is posted, and I will show that to you on the website. So thank you everyone for participating in that. Then the utilities must have program and funding available for low-income households. There's a mandate in Section 2. Tom, I think, is going to talk more about that. And that date was by July 31st, 2021. And that'll be a function of the state of the auditor to monitor that mandate. The next big one, and where I know there's been a little confusion. So for commerce, there is no report that's due as part of that July 31st mandate from this year. That is, that's going to be a compliance check with the auditor. So if you are working on a report right now, you're doing your homework ahead of time or some extra credit. So don't worry, Tom will tell you what's in store there. But the utility assessment report that is part of Section 4 in Section 120, that will be due February 1st, 2022. Okay, so just kind of talk through what all these different pieces are very briefly. The utility data collection is really about just getting the baseline information from you all about the programs you have. And we got information both on low income and non-low income energy assistance programs. So we have that as a starting point. The utility assessment report is really going to be like the workhorse of report that we end up, looking at every 2 years as we try to understand how the state is doing with respect to meeting the goals of CETA. And those goals are stated as, well, now there is a new mandate that all electric utilities in Washington not only have to make programs and funding available for low-income households, but there also needs to be, progressive coverage of energy burden with a couple of thresholds of 60% coverage of all energy burden in the utility service territory by 2030 and 90% by 2050. And an energy burden in this case for the state, as written into our definitions, is 6%. High energy burden is 6% and above in terms of CETA. And so those definitions, there was a rulemaking that Commerce did and that UTC did last year. So those definitions have been codified. So the assessment report this first time around, which is due in February, will help us really baseline where everyone's at and what programs are out there. So then we'll use that same report every 2 years to look at where improvements have been made to those programs, with energy burden being the main metric. And a lot of what we're going to hear about today is some success stories about how programs are actually looking in the state, and really trying to understand what kind of partnerships can support that work. I also realize, and I apologize I didn't put it on this list, there will also be a legislative report that Commerce writes that really details, all of this data we've collected and does an analysis on, some of the mechanisms that the state can use and support to reach these goals. So I think we all know that there's, it's not just about a dollar in, a dollar out, right? There's a lot of other mechanisms and issues at play that create successful programs for addressing energy burden in the state. And so, as we start to create these overlooks of data across the state, which is not something we've ever had before, really, we can really start to get a better sense of, where there's gaps, both in data and in service as well. So it's going to be really, I think, a way to help strengthen programs across the state. And I'm really looking forward to understanding the specifics of the use cases from all your utilities and other organizations, and to really understand, what we need at a state level to help support the work at the local level. So, oops, and I apologize if this is, there we go. All of the data and the reporting template for this report that I just mentioned is available, or will be available, on our website. And so instead of telling you a bunch about, the history and all of this stuff, I thought it'd be useful to actually just show you this website and show you where stuff is at, because I do recognize that these websites aren't always the most accessible. So if you permit me here just 1 second, I'm going to switch over to that website. Okay. Can someone come off mute and tell me if they can see this website?
I can see it, Sarah.
Thank you, Annalyn.
No problem.
Okay, so, and I can also, as soon as I'm done talking, drop this link into the chat. But we have two websites when it comes to the Clean Energy Transformation Act. So we've got the Clean Energy Transformation Act main page, which many of you may be familiar with. This has all the history of all the rulemakings, all of the kind of support documents. So you'll see here on the right are resources, the stakeholder comments, all the documents, the actual legislation, a brief overview of what CETA does, and then all the different phases of rulemakings that we've gone through, as well as past workshop materials. There is, I'll just flag that there are some meetings coming up. They do not have about rulemakings. They don't pertain to the low-income energy assistance program work at this time. But if you are interested in following those, you can scroll down, and on the right-hand side, you can put your email in here and get updates about what's happening in CETA. And so this is the main page that a lot of us come to. I will also say that there is an energy assistance page. If you don't know this one exists, and you only know this one exists, you can get to the energy assistance page from the main CETA page by scrolling down on the right-hand side under More About CETA, Energy Assistance under CETA. I would love a more direct and clearer way to do this, and we are in the process of understanding, of updating this website and understanding how to make it a little bit more usable. It was one of those things that was building over time, and really just, we are now kind of at a pivot point and saying like, okay, we need to make this a resource page. So, but if you clicked on that link, it will get you to the page I was showing you, which is the energy assistance under the Clean Energy Transformation Act. So this includes some resources such as the actual RCW, which I highly recommend going to look at if you're wondering, again, what this arc of work is under CETA, the actual original legislation, and again, the brief overview. It also includes resources for technical advisory group that we used. That was a bunch of utilities and low-income advocates, a lot of people on this call, as well as folks at Commerce, to help us create a template for the utility data report that we did last year. We also recently held a technical advisory group this year to help with the reporting template for the report that will be due February 2022. So anyway, there's a bunch of data resources here. I think the helpful things to note are where some of the data is. So for the utility energy program data that we got last year, if you look under utility energy program assistance survey tool, you will see this Excel sheet right here, utility energy assistance data. That is That is a Excel file that has all of the reported programs for energy assistance that the utilities gave to Commerce last year. It's really helpful, actually, just to kind of see, how many, and it can be broken out by, low-income energy assistance programs as well as kind of more broad energy assistance. And then there below that is a chunk of data that Commerce was responsible for reporting under this section. And it's a statewide energy burden data that we have pulled from the Department of Energy's low-income energy assistance data tool, the DOE lead tool. And so that's the one I have highlighted here. I will admit to you all now that data it's a huge data set. So the Excel, the link that it takes you to, I believe takes you to a Box account where you can download the Excels. They're quite large. They're broken out by area median income and federal poverty level to help understand the differences for those two metrics. But if you're having issues, please get in touch with that data. My hope is to make this a little bit more accessible, and I'm working with some interns this summer and thinking about how to do that with this data. So stay tuned. We're trying to make that data a bit better and a bit cleaner. And then my hope is to also produce just some simple one-pagers that show an analysis of what that data says. But if you want the data, it's about 1 million census tracts, or 1 million different iterations of census tracts and different types of data. This will give you sort of a back of envelope calculation based on the federal data that shows what the energy burden is by census tract. and then it's rolled up into county level as well. So I highly suggest everyone takes a look at that. If we scroll up, we can get to the reporting template that I mentioned. So again, just to repeat, there is no report due to Commerce as part of the July 31st mandate, but there will be a report due February and then every 2 years after as part of the reporting assessment that utilities are responsible for. So we can track the kind of the progress that's being made on covering energy burden as a function of the utility service territory. And so there, as I mentioned, there was also a technical advisory group that helped support that. We had a public meeting to kind of just go through the template and talk about what it is on June 17th, and the recording for that is available, as well as a final reporting template outline. So this is a Word document version of what will eventually be in Excel, which is just going through some kind of final cleaning up and editing behind the scenes. But if you're just like, what is actually going to be asked for in this report, you can look at this document here and it'll tell you all the different pieces that we'll be asking utilities for in February. That will be due by February. And we hope to get that Excel up as soon as possible. So hopefully this is just a very brief rundown of all of where things are. I highly encourage folks to go and start looking at this stuff and ask us questions if things aren't clear. We're just getting this work kind of up on its feet. And as we do that, it's really helpful to understand what is not being understood so that we can, create better communications documents and resources. There's a bunch of other information about CETA and additional resources on the right-hand side. There's this guidelines for energy assistance for low-income households. It's a little bit dated, but it does have the explanation of the definitions for low-income, energy burden, and energy assistance. There's also more information about some of the rulemakings and a link to the state energy strategy as well, which talks about broader state energy office goals around housing and weatherization. So I just want to flag that that's all there. My contact is here at the bottom if you need it. And I'm going to stop sharing. Great. Okay, that was just a short piece of my time. I know I do want to leave time for questions. And if there is anything I can go back and explain better, this is the time to ask. And I'm happy to do so. And I will put the links to those websites in the chat right now.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. We'll pause here for a moment and see if anyone has any questions for Sarah. You can enter that into the chat, or feel free to go ahead and take yourself off mute.
One question I guess I have for you, Sarah.
Yeah.
The reporting that will be due in February, is that going to be a web-based as well, like the previous?
No, it's going to be an Excel template that will have you email us back. The SurveyMonkey was not quite user-friendly enough for what we were asking for. So it will be an Excel template that's going to be available on the website. And I'm really, fingers crossed, hoping I'm going to have that up by next week. So that inevitably, it's soon and inevitable. And then we'll just ask that you email it to us by the date.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
So Sarah, this is John from Tacoma.
Hi, John.
I have a question, and just to let you guys know, it says the chat is disabled when I try to put stuff in the chat. So just a heads up on that. Okay.
Oh.
Okay. The question I think one of the challenges, obviously, when we're starting to think about energy burden, is when we deal with multi-fuel situations. So we have a service area, Tacoma, where we have customers that have natural gas from PSC and then electricity. So one of the challenges, it's hard to determine what the true energy burden is when we don't have the information on the costs that they may have for heating from natural gas. We have it from our electricity, but we won't have it from natural gas as we work on our assessment. So how is the best way? Should we focus on things that are, I'm going to use the term electrically heated as electricity utility, or should we try to figure out another method?
I'm not sure I understand what the first method was, but I'll just comment that for energy burden, the way we're thinking about it is kind of, for lack of a better word, holistically, right? So it's all utility bills associated with home energy, that does not include EV charging or things having to do with agricultural home businesses. And so it's the burden. Setting a level of energy burden is really about trying to find, a priority group and trying to understand, the different use cases that exist in your service territories. I think I agree that as we start to hit around, higher levels of covering energy burden, that we're definitely going to need maybe like a more robust way to understand the breakdown of electricity versus natural gas. I think this first time around, it's really about baselining where we're at. So, I mean, the methodologies in terms of separating out or, and again, I don't know if you want to give me more information on that. I'm not sure that that is something we need to think about on this first report. It's more about what programs do you have, who gets covered, and then, kind of a broad calculation of what burden is in your service territory. Is that address the question?
I think so. I think obviously I'm thinking about the first report, and I think you're right on there. I'm just the challenge is how do you set that target, for the 6%, the 60% by 2030 or 15% over the 2018 baseline. And our situation, we're only going to know really what people have done with their electricity bills. We really won't know what their natural gas bills or other fuel bills will be.
Sure. Yeah. And I recognize that is, going to be challenging in terms of data, but I also think it's important to note that we're talking about making progress, not necessarily a full-fledged plan of what it looks like to get to 60%, right? Like that's sort of the place we're throwing the dart at. We know we have those thresholds that are as goals in CETA. And, I don't have statewide data, but I get the idea that we're pretty far off from 60%, covering 60% of total energy burden at the moment for anyone in the state. That seems like it's a pretty big step. But again, if anyone has more specific data that they know about their utility, please do share. But, I think it's really about how are you improving the efficacy of your programs, right? And as you start stepping through it, maybe even identifying those data gaps. We don't have the data to know, like we know there's this chunk, right? I think it should surprise no one that when you look at the energy burden data, the majority of folks in that have high energy burden are the folks that are in the lowest tier in terms of income, right? And so I think for each utility, there are probably some known use cases that are already out there in terms of, what gaps you have in terms of need. So how do you start thinking about covering that need? And then as things get more, complex and more, evolved in terms of getting more and more energy burden covered, I think there is going to be a need to say, well, gosh, we don't actually have this data, so we don't actually know the next step, right? Or we don't know how, we feel like we've pressed every lever to increase the efficacy of our programs. We don't know where to go next, I think that's a conversation to get elevated, but I do think there's plenty of questions to still ask. And I see Andrew's comment, right? It gets more difficult too when you add in wood, oil, and propane. Absolutely, it does. And, again, really different use cases in different parts of the state. So this is all to say that we have a lot of work to do. I do think, there's a lot of great opportunities to think about, how to strengthen and improve the programs that we do have. There's also like a baseline issue around getting folks just that maybe haven't had explicit low-income programs before, getting those folks, up to the level of that's required by CETA. So I hope that helps answer the question a little bit.
Here, we also have 2 additional entries into the chat. We have
Great.
one from Jean. For total energy burden, when it comes to that point, are utilities asking for billing histories from other providers?
For total energy burden, when it comes to that point, are utilities asking for billing histories from other providers? I think that if I understand the question correctly, that if another, maybe like a CAP or a different agency administers a program, are you asking to get that information? Are people getting third-party information? Is that the question, Jean?
No, for say, like the previous example, gas provider versus an electric provider, are we asking for that information?
I had a bit of trouble hearing you, but I'll answer the best I can. I think, as we'll see today, partnerships with community-based organizations, especially CAPs, are incredibly important to getting this work done. So I think if there are data gaps the utility has, checking with community-based organizations, CAPs that may have that data will be an important step. And I apologize if that's not the...
No, sorry, I had to fix my mic. Can you hear me better now?
Now, yeah, Jean.
Yeah, so I was referring to like a propane company, energy provider for heat for propane, but also the electric. So separate companies, not necessarily a CAP agency.
Yes, I could see that information being needed at some point. Trying to figure out, the different use cases that the utility wants to go after in terms of its own ability to impact energy burden. But I hesitate to answer that question because I feel like it's very different use cases across the state. And, different kinds of companies and different agencies do different programs. But, I imagine that for single fuel utilities that serve, customers that have multiple fuels, within their home, it's going to be important to understand what do you actually need to impact energy burden.
Here, we also have another entry in the chat, and we also have a raised hand from Buddy. So the next entry in the chat is, perhaps there's a role for the state in bringing data together from various energy providers, either by mandating sharing by gas utilities or maintaining a data set.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I do think I see the role of commerce as a data repository and as a resource for, bringing together a better picture of what energy burden looks like across the state. I will be really excited to understand better what the opportunities are to get that data and what's actually necessary to make impacts towards the goals of CETA. Always working with the utilities in the state, again, to help identify those gaps, because there's, as you can see on this call, quite a lot of y'all. So trying to understand from a state perspective what the best kind of use of state resources are, like what's the highest level question or resource that we can be providing or answering to help illuminate those data gaps. Buddy, I see you have a hand raised, and I have about 5 minutes left on my time.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sarah. We appreciate it. Ellensburg, I believe, is the only dual fuel utility consumer owned in the state. We serve natural gas as well. And so we've been wondering how compliance with this section is going to go. And thoughts here is maybe, since Tom is on the call, if we could get some guidance there, either in his presentation or now, it'd be really helpful to how we're going to achieve this.
Buddy, can you elaborate on what you mean by you're wondering how compliance will go? Is there a particular question or concern you have in terms of being a dual fuel utility with respect to the electric side of what CETA is requiring?
Yeah, it goes along the lines of John's comment or question, in that CETA pertains to the electric side, but also in this section you have energy burden, which pertains to all the heating sources in the heating season. And so how do we achieve that objective to get down to 6% energy burden or below? that from a purely electric standpoint or from a pure energy standpoint with all those various energy sources? And what's the role in the electric utilities? I guess, what is their role in achieving that? Does that make sense?
I think so. I'm not sure. Tom will be put on the spot a bit, I think, by that question. I mean, I think it seems like y'all then, if you're a dual fuel utility, you're all very well set up to have that information to really help create programs that are going after what's needed, right? So CETA only pertains to electric utilities. So, you know, with respect to lowering energy burden, you know, it's for the electric utilities. Again, I do think there is a more complex question, complex questions to ask about, you know, making progress. To me, that feels like it's a much further down the line conversation. So without knowing how much of your energy burden you currently cover, just more holistically, it would be hard to, I think, get into a kind of a more detailed conversation. But I suspect there are ways to, I mean, and this is, I guess, you're on your utility to kind of figure out, right? Like knowing what you know about energy burden from your natural gas customers, is there a way to create programs that address both at the same time? Are there, you know, I think there's a lot of complex questions there that are pretty interesting. So hopefully the more data you have in-house helps you make kind of better decisions about, you know, how you design the electric programs for compliance with CETA that will also just be envisioning, you know, supporting lowering energy burden for all customers. But Tom, I know that your time's coming up next. Are you next? I'm sorry, I can't keep track of this.
I'm not sure, but I thought, you know, since I'm here and maybe can jump in real fast and just.
Okay, Sean, can I tag team over to Tom and then let my time end?
Yes, yes, please go ahead. Yeah, we had, apologies, I moved around the agenda here a little bit, but Tom, I think it'd be great if you would go ahead and address that question, and then we can move to
That's a good segue.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thanks.
Time today.
Well, thanks, Sarah. Thanks. And it's an interesting question. And as I sit here, I wasn't prepared to answer it, and I'm not sure there is an easy answer to it. But what we have here in front of us is a law that addresses electricity. And you have customers who have multi-fuel, and you have a utility that's providing multi-fuel and has to reach a goal or show progress toward achieving a goal in a future date. And so, you know, that's about as far as I can go is what I read in the act as it exists today. So utility, I think, just give us the best information you have. It sounds like a lot of utilities may not have the information associated with other energy providers. I don't know what the answer to the question. You know, this is the sound of me just thinking through it. But everything we've been doing is geared around electricity and what supplying electricity providers are doing to comply with CETA. And it's the question of, you have energy burden that's measured at a holistic level, and yet you have compliance requirements that apply to one fuel source associated with that service. So I'm not sure how it would play out.
Okay, thank you for that answer, Tom. And I think what I want to do here is just move us on to the next speaker. I recognize that there are there's a hand up and some chat function happening. So if you would please, everyone who's in attendance, if you can list your name, your affiliation, and your email address, we'll be able to send out communications after this event. We did not have an RSVP function, so the chat should be working now for that purpose. I want to go ahead and introduce Amy Burke with Bonneville Power Administration. She is the low-income weatherization manager there. She's going to be presenting on those energy efficiency dollars available, followed by a Q&A, and then we'll have Tom up for his presentation. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Amy. Thank you very much.
Hey everybody, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure I wasn't double muted. which is definitely an, an issue for some folks. So I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully that works as well. All righty. So hi, everyone, and thank you so much for organizing this, Sean. I'm glad this was rescheduled because this is a really important conversation. So I was asked to just provide a very high-level overview today about Bonneville's low-income utility energy efficiency programs. I'm definitely sure some of this is going to be reviewed for you, but hopefully you'll hear some new nuggets of information. And I do believe that there's a Q&A at the end of my section too, so please jot down any of your questions and ask those then. So for those of you who don't know me, I am the program manager for BPA's weatherization and low-income utility and grant programs. That means that I work with utilities, state agencies, and tribal representatives to help improve residential homes in their communities. I'm relatively new to this role and working with low-income programs. I just started last year, but I have been working in energy efficiency for many years, developing and implementing HVAC and water heating programs. The learning curve is very high for this role, but it is really inspiring work, and I'm happy to be here. So for more than 3 decades, Bonneville Public Utilities, community action agencies, a whole host of folks, including many of you on this call, have been working really hard to improve equitable access to energy efficiency in the Pacific Northwest. And first and foremost, our program is a public interest program, and this means that we invest funds, ratepayer funds, to provide energy efficiency at low or no cost to some of our region's most vulnerable residents, and to hopefully improve their overall health and comfort and long-term resiliency. And this, of course, and I know that this is all information that you're familiar with, but of course it can help reduce energy burdens, improve efficiency, reduce home fires, improve indoor air quality, which can be really important for folks, especially during COVID and wildfire season, comfort, health, and structural issues, and then many other benefits. We don't directly complete the work or install the heat pumps or insulate the homes. We provide the funding, the technical resources, marketing resources, agency connections, utility connections, and program review, and also training to be able to complete that work in a way that works best for everybody's members. And we think that autonomy is definitely in everyone's best interests. So to accomplish this Herculean mission, we have 2 programs. One path is, of course, through our Bonneville utility customers, and you can use your ratepayer funding for low-income projects. If BPA's incentives don't cover the full cost of the project, utilities can often use funding from other sources that are available. Some utilities will work with local tribes on energy efficiency projects as well. And this is the pathway that I'll be focusing most on today. We do have another pathway, which has a whole host of other detail, which I would need a much longer presentation time to go into. But we host a state and tribal grant program. And we work with 4 state agencies and several tribal councils to support their energy efficiency projects. So this is, of course, really important work, and the network of organizations, utilities, tribes, states, agencies that all do this work is really amazing. And for me, coming into this role, it was definitely one of the things that I was most impressed by. And I just love that this is just a fraction of the groups who are all involved in this program. This is definitely one of my favorite slides. This is a graphic that is located in our low-income energy efficiency new opportunities guide, which I know is a bit of a mouthful. And I know there's a lot of nuance within each one of these connections. I'm not going to go into all the details, but this is kind of gives you a very high-level overview of Bonneville and how we kind of relate to all the different agencies and the flow of funding between all of them. So this new opportunities guide is an excellent resource. There's a lot of advice on building relationships and working with community action agencies, especially for utilities who haven't historically been involved with low income work. There's utility and action agency contact information. There's also some example utility case studies and agreements. And there's a full list of all of the federally recognized tribes in BPA service territory. There's a lot more information in there. So this is a really great starting point for anyone who wants to get involved in low income, or anyone who hasn't been involved for a while and just wants to get up to date on what's going on in our program. And so for many of our utility customers on this call, I'm sure you are painfully familiar with our implementation manual, but this is really kind of the basis of our utility low income program. And of course, for our utility low income program, that is really a focus on all of our deemed measures that we offer low income equivalents for. So it's based on data-driven approved savings from the RTF, the Regional Technical Forum. And of course, this document includes all of the requirements for documentation, what the qualifying home and primary heating types are, incentive levels, the pre and post conditions that are required for that project, any applicable kind of technician certification requirements or qualified products lists. And then there's just a lot of guidance in there about how to perform the work and how to, for example, how to treat an A-frame home when you're insulating that ceiling. So for Bonneville, we key off of the Weatherization Assistance Program, the definition of low income, which is 200% of the federal poverty income level. Within our grant program and also utility, there is some flexibility in how the states and the tribes can define what low income is. And so I can provide more information on that if you all have questions, but I'm not going to go into too much detail with that since I don't have too much time. So historically, low income has had a heavy focus on weatherization, but I just want to remind you all that it's not just weatherization. So we have HVAC, smart thermostats, water heating, and for our grant program, there are a few other measures that are available. But for our utility programs, insulation, all the insulation types, windows, doors, whole house and prescriptive air sealing, duct insulation, which is a fairly new measure, both ducted and ductless heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, and contractor installed smart thermostats. So just a call out that please stay up to date on any future IM measure changes. We're in the middle of making updates to that. So try and stay in the loop about any changes that are coming down the line. So I just wanted to give a snapshot of kind of what the most popular low income measures have been. I didn't look at 2020 since that was an unusual year, as we all know. But looking at 2019 and prior to that, the most popular measures that we saw through our utility program, low income program, was attic and floor insulation, specifically in single family homes, ductless heat pumps, windows, and air sealing. That's not to say that we don't see activity for all the other measures, but that's kind of been what we've seen mostly. So with CETA, and then also with the launch of our new Comfort Ready Home program, there may be some change in priorities and quantities. And so we're kind of waiting to see what changes there. And I'll go into Comfort Ready Home a little bit later in this presentation. So about our low income EE program, we do have measures available for every housing type, but that doesn't necessarily mean that each measure is available for every housing type. So there's a really comprehensive list in our IM about what measures are available for what housing type, and the nuances and that's all involved with that. For utilities, you are subject to all of our IM requirements for each of the individual D measures. So that includes if there are any applicable qualified products lists, specs, and general guidance for those individual measures. Some of our measures do require that the installer be certified. So for example, PTCS does require that the installer have a PTCS certification for both duct sealing and heat pumps. And all of that information is located in the individual measure sections. Some utilities, of course, will be able to implement and carry out those projects themselves, or some of them will also work through a third-party provider, or a combination of both, depending on who they're working with and what the project is and what their infrastructure is. So for our low-income programs, utility low-income programs, we do reimburse utilities at a much higher rate for measures when the household is low income. So it's really up to utilities to figure out how much budget you want to allocate for low income projects. And it's also up to you how much of that budget, or excuse me, of that incentive that you pass on to your customer. It can be a really great way to use excess budget. I know in the past, our EARS or energy efficiency representatives have worked with utilities to invest more in low income to be able to use up some of their excess budget at the end of a rate period. Most of our measures are paid dollar for dollar. Some do have a cost cap. So for example, ductless heat pumps are paid dollar for dollar up to $3,800. Any repair costs are additional, and repair costs is a little bit of a gray area. But when you do invoice BONNEVILLE, it is a separate line item. Qualifying health and safety is covered 100%. And qualifying can be defined many ways. We do have some examples in the IM of what we have qualified in the past. But if you have any questions about what qualifies as health and safety, please contact your EAR and they'll run down that answer for you. Please note that any repair costs do come out of your overall utility EEI budget as well. So just adding in some links here, especially for anyone who's fairly new. So this is just the landing page for our implementation manual. You can go here and get the latest version. And then also for our UES measure list, which will tell you exactly what measures are available in your heating and cooling zones. And then especially for insulation projects, what the reimbursement rate is. So like I said, I'm not going to go into all of the specifics of each of the measures because that would take quite a while. So for, generally speaking, if you satisfy all the deemed measure qualification requirements and listed in the IM and the home is income qualified, you're at it's pretty likely that you'll qualify for that project. For multi-unit projects, properties, any 2, 3, or 4 unit dwelling, this is kind of unique to low income. At least 50% of that building has to qualify as low income for the entire building to qualify. And for anything that's 5 or more units, same thing, at least 50% has to qualify for the whole building to qualify. Utilities, of course, have, have the ability to make their programs more strict. So verifying income qualification. So verifiable source can be defined in many ways. This is definitely one of the larger challenges that I've noticed in low income. Just some examples of documentation include pay stub, certification by a LIHEAP administrator. And so there's a lot of different ways to income qualify, and our COTRs, when they perform oversight, are definitely well versed in all of these different ways. For utility programs, pre and post audits are required, and auditors, of course, will determine which measures would be appropriate for that home. And the audit forms are required to be retained on file. So everyone loves reporting. I know that's everyone's favorite topic. So as with everything else, just follow the IM documentation requirements for each individual measure. Utilities, of course, can require additional documentation to support their own program implementation. There are some examples of some additional low-income documentation, like a funding worksheet, occupancy or income statement, warranty info, and of course an audit form to keep on file. But just to call out that when you actually go to invoice Bonneville, that it's treated the same as every other utility measure. So just a call out for community action agencies, since it's such a, they're such an important player in all of our low income programs, you know, that they are really well versed at braiding together different funding sources, but each have different rules, often have many waiting lists, but they're just an amazing resource for completing home energy audits, income verification, working with subcontractors, and just being an excellent partner in the region. So for anyone who wants to get involved with low income, these are just some kind of high level suggestions when you're reaching out to a community action agency. Really know what your goals are and explain how your EEI or utility funding works, so they have an idea of kind of what the requirements are that they'll be required to follow. So I'm not going to go into all the details here, but all of this information is listed in our new opportunities guide. So take a look when you get a chance. A quick nod to our tribal outreach. So we work a lot with tribes, and some of our utilities certainly work with local tribes to complete energy efficiency work. And nod to the work that we do. So Bonneville does have a tribal trust responsibility and policy, and we work very, very closely with our tribal affairs. We do, generally under normal times when we're able to travel more, we prefer to meet in person. We do recommend finding a really good contact and finding out what kind of housing, how they manage their housing, either through a department or an authority. There is a wide variety of organizations, how tribes will work with energy efficiency, and just be really open about what your goals are and what you're hoping to accomplish with them. So nod really quickly to our Comfort Rating Home program, which launched at the beginning of this year. So this is a partnership between Bonneville and Pacific Northwest Electric Public Utilities. It's a heavy focus on weatherization, HVAC, and water heating, and really building up that technician workforce. All of our resources are free to utilities, techs, and homeowners. And I really want to make this clear, this program is a support services program. So it is not meant to replace any community action agencies or anybody else doing work in the low income space. It's really just to support utilities who want to build a low income program, if they have questions, if they need training materials or marketing materials. The launch has been very successful, and they're currently working with different utilities to build up their program plans. Participation is not required, and there's a whole menu of things that folks can reference and just build the program out in any way that works for them. And we have, so like I said, we have marketing resources, training, homeowner resources. There's a interface where folks can find a contractor. And so there's just a lot of versatility with this program. And feel free to reach out to us if you want to participate. We do have a lot of resources, and we're adding to them every day. So we have a air sealing made simple training. We're working on a training right now on how to insulate A-frame homes, which is always a fun topic. There's a field guide, product guides. There's just a lot of information here. And we also have a whole list of dedicated field specialists who are there to also support technicians and utilities if they have any questions. So their role is really just to help recruit contractors, support utilities, figure out what training needs are required. It's just a really good resource if you want to get involved. So if you have questions, who do you call? If you're a utility, I suggest reaching out to your EAR or your COTR. You can also reach out to me. If you have any questions about our low income grants, you can always reach out to me and I can work with you to answer that question. If you want to get involved in our low income work group, it meets typically throughout the year. This last year has been a little bit of an anomaly, but it's open to the public and you can participate virtually. It's really just a chance for folks to get together, brainstorm, network, and just talk about what's working and what isn't. So please reach out to me if you want to get on that mailing list if you're not already. And I think this may be on my last slide. Just note that we are going into a new IM cycle. This year is a little unusual because we have a new tracking system that's coming online called Beats. And we have some minor changes that are being published on October 1st. And we have much more substantive changes that we're calling the rate period IM. And that's being published on April 1st. So please keep in the know about what those are. I will say, and I won't go into any details, but there may be just a couple updates to our low income measures. So just keep in the loop about that. And I think that's it for me. So please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Amy. Yeah, we'll set aside 5 minutes here for Q&A with Amy. So I'll go ahead and pause and see if anyone has a question to add to the chat, or feel free to take yourself off of mute and ask your question. All right, I think that was such a good, clear presentation. No one has any questions. So thank you, Amy. Very much appreciate your presentation there.
Thanks, Sean.
You're very welcome. Thank you. So next up, we have Tom Bernard from the State Auditor's Office. He will be presenting. I have an extended Q&A section for him. So if we need a little bit more time, we set that aside. I think I don't know if we're all ready for presentation mode. I think I can still see Amy, so we can get back into that. Oh, excellent. Thank you. Okay, are you ready, Tom?
Sure.
All right, take it away.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the space here to kind of talk about the SAO and upcoming audits. And I wanted to approach this in two sections. All along, we've been having workshops, and I've been kind of in those workshops amassing some understanding of how this act works and the laws and rules around it. And when I've had opportunities, I've been talking about the separation of the auditor from the utility decision-making process as a function of our audit standards. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about that, just to clear up any questions or expectations about what the auditor can and cannot do and why that is. First off, earlier we were talking about the function of the law, and our audits of this act are really going to be grounded in the criteria, which is the RCW 19405, and then the WAC, which is the WAC 19440. And then the other WACs that are associated with ecology WACs with the greenhouse gas emissions. They have a set of WACs out there that WAC rules that utilities need to follow in reporting their greenhouse gas emissions. But the words in those sections are really the only criteria we have to audit. So we're going to stick to those, and I'll cover that in a little bit. But if you could display the handout that we provided, is that possible? And I'm going to put the link to this document in the chat box, if I can get the chat box up again. So please, there's the link. They've posted it for you. I encourage everybody on the call to download this. But the first half that you're seeing here is the first half of what I wanted to talk about. It's the expectation of what to expect. And so we've fielded some questions or received some questions along the way if particular programs are going to be compliant with the act, if I do certain activities that we're planning to do. Will this conform with the act? Will we be found in compliance? Will this result in a finding? You know, those type of questions we're unable to answer, period. And the reason is that we're not trying to avoid answering the question. We're just prohibited by our auditing standards from opining on hypotheticals or things that haven't happened yet. And what I wanted to do was just make sure everybody understands that when we start an audit, we're asking the entity for its final and best answer as to how it complied with the act. We're going to perform procedures around the support that the utilities provide, demonstrating their compliance to verify they complied with the act. And we're going to use the results of our audit work to conclude as to whether they complied, and as a basis for our opinion in the report that we'll publish at the end of the audit. Another reason we don't want to be providing guidance on hypotheticals, because the assumptions of a hypothetical or some kind of proposal, at the time a proposal is being proposed, there are certain assumptions it's based on that can differ greatly when it comes time for implementation. And so we don't want to be the standards keep us from being in a position where we're providing assurance on something that's hypothetical and then the utilities relying on that assurance and acting to comply with the act. And then if something goes wrong, they didn't comply with the act for some reason. Whose fault is it? What's the auditor for getting involved in the first place? So those type of, we have to avoid being any part of any predeterminations or any kind of developing expectation of what will work and what won't work. The act requires utilities to comply with the act, and part of that is the utilities' responsibility to understand the act and develop the controls and processes by which it evaluates what it's required to do, and the processes and controls to ensure that it's doing what it needs to do to vet its questions appropriately in arriving at how it complies with the act, so it can present its final answer for audit. So the way we responded to questions to this point is, well, when it comes time to audit, we're going to be interested in knowing how utilities do certain things to ensure compliance. And that is required by standard that we develop an understanding about the utilities' internal control environment. What activities did it do that are critical to its compliance, and that we understand what those are, so we can design the competent tests to test what the utilities' compliance and arriving at our opinion for our report. So at the start of the examination, you can expect the auditor to say, okay, you've provided a lot of information to Commerce, you've provided these Excel reports to Commerce. Is this your final answer to these questions? Is this what you want to be audited to? We'll verify that with the utilities before we start. And so as the utility is going through its processes to assess its programs, we wanted to document its understanding of the Act's requirements and what it did to obtain that understanding of the Act's requirements, so that we understand exactly how the utility arrived at its conclusion. So if things are unclear, we are encouraging utilities to research those with its own legal counsel, with rule makers, with other consultant professionals, with other peer utilities perhaps, and just and document what that research yielded, so that you have support for why you acted in a particular way in complying with the Act, and then have that ready for audit. So just to reiterate, it's important that the auditor refrain from being involved in management's decision as to how it's to act to comply with the act or any audit material, any audit subject. Our BARS manual that's available on our website, okay, there's a BARS gap accounting manual that's available electronically. There's an accounting section to that, and under the accounting section is an internal control section. And I would encourage you to take a look at that. Specifically, there's a section sub 110 and 120 that talks about controls over compliance. And so this is where our audit standards are rooted, and this talks about what what the responsibilities of the government are with respect to developing and maintaining controls over compliance. So the reason why I'm bringing all this up is just so that people understand when we're unable to answer questions about what do I do in this particular situation and we're unable to answer, it's not that we don't want to answer, it's that we're prohibited from answering to maintain our independence that's required by our auditing standards. So I think any questions about that, I'll stop here. I just want to make sure that we at least had that discussion and people are clear on why we can't do certain things and what to expect when the audit starts. Okay, all right, good. Thank you for that little preamble there. As we get into, so knowing that the second part of this document we put together, just to kind of talk about the types of questions you can anticipate us asking. And I think it's important. No, they didn't contemplate things like the multi-fuel customer question we were just asking. It's still in the phases of using even this forum information we're gleaning from this forum to form the procedures we're going to perform. But this list, this bulleted list, gives you an idea of the types of questions we're going to be asking. So it really is kind of here's the test. This is, we're going to want to understand, one, to the extent you haven't already given it to Commerce. If you've already given it to Commerce, we'll work with them to get the information so you don't have to repeat it. But the idea being a list of the energy assistance programs and funding that the utility made available to low-income households by the July 31st, 2021 deadline. Now, there's no standard format or anything like that. It's really meant to be just an understanding of the programs and funding that the utility identified to offer its low-income housing customers. So, not a whole bunch of information, just what were those programs? Where did you start? And then, part of the controls and processes at the utility level, how you will be interested in knowing and understanding how the utility identified low-income households. I see there's links, on the Commerce website that give you access to the resources. Every utility may approach it differently. We want to understand how each utility did it, approach that section so that we can develop tests that correspond to how they approached it. Recognizing that people can do different things to address certain compliance requirements. We don't want to pigeonhole people into saying you have to use this resource. There may be other things at their disposal that they can use that are effective. And us understanding that will help us streamline our testing accordingly. How the utility developed its program to ensure that they were available to low-income households. In accordance with WAC and CETA definitions, some programs may have different low-income thresholds than CETA. What did the utility do to bring consistency with the requirements of CETA in using that program? The next bullet, how the utility made programs and funding available to its customers. The Act requires you make it available. What did you do to make it available? Maybe not looking for war and peace here, just an understanding of the things that you did to make it available to your customers, the outreach components, things of that nature, things that will be revealed when you do your February 2nd test or report to Commerce. How the utility determined the program will reduce household energy burden. You know, what is it about the program that you designed it to do to address energy burden for those that need it? Sorry, I'm losing my voice. So that kind of gives you the overview of what we're interested in knowing in order to develop the testing, because we want to make sure we're not auditing, mindful of costs of the audit. Want to do what we absolutely have to be as efficient as possible. And the more information we can have up front, and the more that you can be prepared when we approach you to start the audit, the more efficient the audit will be, and the lower the cost of the audit. So we want to work with you to make sure that we're achieving that. On the greenhouse gas emissions, I know that's not subject to this workshop, but I mean that's a component that we'll be looking at on this first round. There's greenhouse gas emissions reporting, so we're going to be looking at how the calculations reported in Commerce and the supporting documentation around those calculations comply with Ecology's WAC. And then finally, the timing. We'll work with each of the utilities. We plan on issuing utilities each their own report and on compliance for a given period. And so that's, and we'll work with you as to when the timing works to exchange data to the extent it's not already been provided to Commerce, and something we can get from Commerce or download from their website, as Sarah was pointing out earlier. So we're looking to streamline it as much as possible and do what we need to do to meet our audit requirement under the Act, and verify the assertions that each utility did comply with the Act and in the way it did. So that's the sum of what I was going to cover today. I know it doesn't answer a whole ton of detailed questions, but I think it gives a good overview of what we're going to be needing to help streamline the process once we get there. Let me look over. Don't think I'm forgetting anything. Any questions at all? I open it up, I guess, to questions. Okay. Sean, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Tom. I very much appreciate that presentation.
Yeah, I would just throw in also contact information on the right-hand margin there. Kelly Collins is our director of local government audit. Brandy Pritchard, who's on the call, she is my assistant director. There's my contact information as well. And Travis Byrel, who's assistant manager for energy audits. He's on the call as well, but there's contact information if you have questions, access to our website. We haven't set up anything on our website because really, we're coming in after the fact. We're not trying to set up criteria ourselves. We're relying on the criteria that's set for us to perform these audits. And so that's where we are. Did I leave anything out, Sean, of any interest to you?
I think that's good. There is, just want to remind folks, in the chat, the address to access this document is in there. So people want to download that and keep it in their files, it's there. But yeah, I think that was a comprehensive presentation there. And if there are no questions for Tom, I think what I'd like to do here, we're into the second hour here of the meeting. Let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and have a presentation with Andrew and with Buddy for Ellensburg and Hope Source. So we'll be back here at 2:50 to restart the workshop.
Hey, Sean, real quick. This is John from Tacoma. Tom, if you're still on the line, It's a really quick question. When do you anticipate beginning compliance audits for CETA low income? Is it after the February 1st assessment report? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Kind of, yeah. I think the first compliance requirement of the July 31st programs, if you have a list of what you did, you know, the list of what you did, and you can provide that, we can, you know, it's final, it's over, you know, that time has passed. We want to make sure that the things we're auditing have passed and that they're finalized, and that seems like it would be finalized. So we might be able to take care of that early. And because we have to audit 41 utilities, it's a lot of utilities we have to audit. It might be good to do things as they get done, to the extent the utility is willing and able to accommodate us. But we can work with you to wait till the February 2nd deadline as well, till after that report is with Commerce, if you like. So it's an open, it's really dependent on what the utility would like to do, and we have availability to do it as well. Does that help you, John?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, you bet.
Okay, we'll make it 2:53 just to extend it a little bit longer. So we'll see you all back here at 2:53. All right, well, welcome back, everyone. Thanks for sticking with the workshop here. I want to thank all my first crew of presenters, to Sarah, Amy, and Tom. We're now going to move into section 2 here, which we're going to, the goal here is just to highlight a couple of different models for how utilities are delivering services to low-income populations, both through partnerships with CAP agencies and through a hybrid approach, from delivering some assistance directly and then a partnership for the weatherization. So these are just a couple of flavors of what's happening here in the state. The goal for today is just to generate a conversation, to provide a little more context for options and possibilities. Without further ado, I want to introduce Andrew Lyons and Buddy Stanovich. I think Andrew's going to kick this off. We'll have a Q&A opportunity after their presentation, but if folks have questions, feel free to go ahead and put those in the chat as the presentation happens, and I think we'll be able to handle those. So without further ado, please go ahead and take it away, Andrew.
Awesome. Welcome, everyone. And I don't have a presentation, so we'll just kind of walk through this, but definitely write down questions that you may have during our process. My kind of goal is to give an overview, and then if people have specifics about the partnership, we can dive into those for sure. So brief introduction. My name is Andrew Lyons. I work with the Community Action Council based in Kittitas County, and manage, direct a number of direct service programs, including both weatherization and energy assistance. And then I'll allow Buddy Stanovich to introduce himself.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Buddy Stanovich, Power and Gas Manager for the City of Ellensburg. Ellensburg has a small electric utility. We're about 24 average megawatts. We serve about 10,300 customers right here in the center of Washington. We also have a natural gas utility that serves just under 5,000 customers, and also serve water and sewer to the city of Ellensburg.
Wonderful. Thank you, Buddy. So kind of two parts. I'll briefly talk kind of about the history of what both Hope Source and the city offer, and Buddy will add some comments as needed, and then we'll go a little bit more into the direct kind of partnership details. So first, Hope Source, like many community action councils across the state, we, in terms of energy assistance, we offer the federal/state LIHEAP program, which is an award-based program for energy assistance. And we work with all three of the utilities in Kittitas County. So we run administer the PSC Help program through Puget Sound Energy. Through the local PUD, there is a Helping Hands program that is a donation-based program that we administer for them. And then we just recently started administering the qualification for the City of Ellensburg Low-Income Senior Disabled Discount Rate Program. And then in terms of weatherization, we've done weatherization for a long period of time, federal and state. In addition to the same sort of thing, we have funding sources through all three utilities that are able to help us work with contractors to install energy saving as well as health and safety measures in people's homes. So the City of Ellensburg, they've offered a low-income senior disabled discount rate, at least prior to 2003. Buddy and I were trying to figure out how long it went back, but it seems like it's been in place for quite a long time. And then in 2019, the city worked with a consultant and the utility committee to expand and modify that discount rate program. They adjusted some of the income qualifications for it. And then they began contracting with Hope Source to do the income qualification portion of that. And in terms of weatherization, similar, the city has offered a rebate program that was available to all customers, and both for their gas and electric. But starting around 2013, they started requiring people that were on the discount rate to receive some sort of assessment for weatherization potential. And so they reached out to Hope Source to begin contracting, not only do that initial assessment, but also to begin working with contractors to weatherize those homes that were eligible candidates. And then they tied into the BPA that you guys heard about earlier, low income conservation program, and be able to use those dollars and pass them through to Hope Source for the work that we were doing on low income families. And then in 2019, they also began offering energy audits to all customers for a nominal fee, and then contracted with Hope Source to perform those audits. So a little bit more about the partnership details. So as I said, the city offers a discount rate program, which is it's 50% for customers that are low income and either disabled or over the age of 65. And so the way that we just started this process is that they actually apply to Hope Source, and then we go through the income verification process using LIHEAP income guidelines and verify disability if that's applicable. And then on a monthly basis, we invoice the city, listing all the customers that we've income verified during the previous month. And then that qualification will last for a 2-year period to allow them to stay on that discount rate program. And then in terms of weatherization, kind of what I talked about before, the city receives BPA conservation dollars, and they've set aside a certain amount of those dollars from that, and then also from their utility, to be able to provide us with resources to install measures in low-income homes, and also to provide some program support and admin support for that as well. And they do that, have done that for a longer period of time on the electric side, but also recently started doing that on the gas side as well. So those are kind of the basic overview I have of the partnership. And Buddy, I don't know if you want to add some stuff in now or wait for questions or whatever works.
No, the partnership that the city and Hope Source has developed has worked out great. We've been able to achieve quite a bit of weatherization measures through that. Being a small utility and limited staff, we rely on the Bonneville implementation manual, and actually just paired a lot of our gas rebates kind of to make it all consistent with a similar program there. So it's worked out well, and the income verification that we just set up with Hope Source a couple years ago, it's been a wonder, especially for our billing department that had to handle pretty sensitive information and get that out to a third party. It's been a big benefit here at the city.
Yeah, so we can just open it to questions if people have questions on how the partnership works or challenges or whatever that we've encountered. Happy to respond to those.
Yeah, Andrew and Buddy, this is Sean. I actually have a question here. So you've got the income verification that occurs. Does that stays with the agency, and you're able to verify upon request documentation for that? Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, we keep it. We keep that information, and then they would have the ability to monitor us for sure.
Now, in terms of the energy burden reduction, have you guys discussed how that might be? I guess the utility would be able to potentially generate that from seeing who's enrolled in the program, and then if there was a reduction there, have you all talked about how that might be generated? Or because you'll have the income data for the customers, but then the utility will have the energy consumption. So I'm just curious, if there's been any thought about how working together would be able to provide you with the reporting needed, to the SAO or otherwise.
I think as far as energy burden goes, and a lot of this compliance with CETA, Andrew and I will be working very closely together on this. One of the challenges is that our low income customers that are receiving the discount is maybe well, it is a small subset of our entire customers, and we have to reduce the burden for all our customers that meet a larger criteria or a higher criteria, I would say. So yeah, there'll definitely be some figuring out that we have to do.
We have a question in the chat. We actually have a couple questions now in the chat. How do you address 2-unit renter income verification to do weatherization?
So I think the presenter for BPA talked about that a little bit. So there is guidelines in the manual, in the BPA low income conservation manual, and then it follows very closely with our state manual for weatherization as well. So 2+ is that you need to income verify at least 50% of the people that are living in the unit in order to weatherize that. And then rental is definitely possible. There's just different aspects of how you handle that contractually, and some things have actually changed just recently with the state of Washington in terms of our other weatherization funding sources, in terms of how we handle renter contributions and owner contributions and things like that. And yes, we are paying prevailing wage.
And Andrew, this is Sean. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the role of other funding that is brought to bear on programming? So, for example, prevailing wage is a result of some of the other funding that you're bringing in. And could you maybe just address how you're leveraging those dollars?
Yeah, it becomes complicated. I mean, I think we have 8 different funding sources for the weatherization program right now. And so we do look at, as much as possible, trying to simplify program design, right? So that we can be the most effective in serving customers and clients. But at the same time, sometimes that means that we do separate out funding sources, and we may do a fund a project that's a utility only based project, or a utility plus some other funding source that's not tied to some more restrictive requirements such as prevailing wage. And so we have some flexibility to be able to do that. But it often, like if you're working on a project, it's really helpful to have many different funding sources that you're able to do that. And so in some cases, we definitely do have to go with the more stringent requirements, including prevailing wage and other things like that. But it also helps us leverage a lot. So in answering your question directly, utility funding is vital for us in some cases of justifying savings to investment ratios and things like that, and buying back certain measures. That can be really helpful to allow us to do that.
Thank you for that question. We'll pause just a moment, see if anyone else has any questions in the chat, or if you want to go off of mute, we can address your questions there. All right. Well, thank you both for your presentations today. If you can stay on the line, that'd be great. I think we've got one more group of presenters here, so I think we're moving along a little faster. Get you all back to your regularly scheduled days. Next up, we have Kyle White, Program Manager at Opportunity Council for Weatherization. Also have Lindsay Gross at Orcus Power and Light. We did have a change up in our personnel here for presenting, so I think we're going to be a little bit light on the bill assistance programming information for Opalco, and probably dig in a little bit more on low-income weatherization. So maybe, Lindsay, I guess if you can provide just a brief overview of Opalco's approach to your low-income programming, and speak perhaps a little bit to the bill assistance, and then we can transition to Kyle about where we're at with weatherization. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you.
In 2017, OPALCO started an energy assist program. It became a new tariff on every member's bill, which is how we generated the money to get this program going. It helps about 350 people per month. And it's based off of if you're receiving some other assistance somewhere. So free and reduced lunch, Apple Health, and it's based on household size. So a one person household could get up to 31 all the way up to $60 in assistance for people. Let's see, there's no age requirement or income requirement, just as long as you have some other source of, or if you're getting some other assistance there to prove. And one other side note for low-income assistance, OPALCO is starting their second community solar project, and we just got a large grant and about $1 million. And so the generation from the community solar will be put into low-income funds for helping with assistance on bills in the future. So that's about what I could get. Sorry, it's not my forte. So that's about what I could get on details before we started.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much for that. And I'll mention, you know, the CAP Agency Opportunity Council provides the LIHEAP benefits out in San Juan County. So that's why I'm mentioning it's a hybrid program where the utilities offering the rate discount and then the agencies delivering LIHEAP funds. And so that's just another flavor for bill assistance here in the state. I wanted to try to provide. And then, you know, moving on to weatherization program, you know, I know Opportunity Council has partnered with the utility to do energy efficiency programming, both sort of near low income and also low income over the years. And there's, you know, been some changes in personnel and contract, contracting. And so I want to move over to you, Kyle, and just maybe talk a little bit about the history of working, you know, with OPALCO, with the BPA funds, and then what the future is looking like there.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So my name is Kyle White, and I manage the low-income weatherization and home repair programs for the Opportunity Council, and our service territories are Whatcom County, Island County, and San Juan County. And I was going to kind of do a background on weatherization and all that, but Andrew was so good to do that for me that I don't need to do that. So thanks, Andrew. But we're similar of Hope Source. We're a community action agency, and we've administered the low-income weatherization program in our service territory for 40 plus years. And similar to Hope Source, our funders are federal funds, state funds, and then utility funds. So we do bring 6, 7, you know, funding sources potentially to weatherization projects in our service territory. And I was trying to go back to see when we first started connecting with OPALCO. And Sean, maybe I know you were part of that, but I think it's probably 8 or 9 years ago we started partnering specifically with OPALCO for low-income weatherization, and we carried that on for I think 4 or 5 years, up to a few years ago, where we kind of stopped that relationship for a number of reasons. Nothing really bad, but that's just the way it went. But the relationship on, you know, from my side, for administering the low-income program it was really simple. We worked with OPALCO to draw up what we call a memorandum of agreement. It was a 2-page document where it kind of just talked about the relationship between the parties, kind of the scope of services, compensation, reporting, and documentation. And from the Opportunity Council side, we kind of just went along with doing business as normal, as far as, you know, we get clients eligible for weatherization in San Juan County, and we would basically do the audit on the home, perform the work, and then we would bill a portion of that work to OPALCO, and they would reimburse us, I believe, with the BPA money that they received. Trying to think if I'm missing anything, but it was a real simple thing for us, and then Opelka would do their reporting to BPA, obviously.
And Kyle, there's also some BPA funds. I know this was not really gone into any detail earlier about the direct grants from BPA, but so there are additional low-income funds that are coming into that service territory that are administered by Opportunity Council. So it was to a certain extent just an expansion of what was already occurring through adding the utility direct EI dollars in addition to those direct grants. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true, Sean. So so basically the Opelka money would supplement the budgets for our clients out there, and basically allow us to do a small handful of additional low-income projects out in the San Juans every year. The one interesting thing with using basically two BPA fund sources, you could call it, is you had to be careful with reporting and not basically using the two different pots of money to pay for one particular weatherization measure. Wasn't a big deal, but was one thing we just had to be careful of.
Yeah, I think that's a good clarification there. And I think it's worth noting here that, this is a similar arrangement across the state where agencies delivering low-income weatherization may be receiving those BPA dollars, direct grant dollars, and so working in service territories now that may not directly fund weatherization from utility operations, but that work is occurring. So I think that's for those maybe not aware of that, that is an element to the work here happening. Now, Lindsay and Kyle, in terms of moving forward, as I understand it, there's an interest in continuing or restarting collaboration there in terms of trying to expand services to low income. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of putting us on the spot, Sean, but yeah, that's what we're doing. No, actually, Lindsay and I talked a few weeks ago about that and kind of past history with the program. And yes, we're going to be talking hopefully in the near future about reconnecting and with weatherization. So
Sure, absolutely.
Wonderful. Sorry for putting you on the spot there.
Sorry.
Okay. Well, I think I'll just pause here and see if folks have any questions about this type of approach, or even more general questions here that maybe were missed earlier in the presentations. Like I said, we're moving a little faster than scheduled, which is great. So I'll just stop here for a moment to see if anything percolates. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. If you haven't input your contact info and your affiliation in the chat, please do that. We want to be able to follow up with folks as needed from this presentation. There will be a recording of it made available. So for any colleagues who missed this, or if you want to rewatch some of it, that will be available. And want to thank everyone for their time, all the presenters and the attendees for your participation today. My hope is that this yields some communication, some conversations, some new collaborations in your service territory. And hopefully, for the purpose of delivering low-income services to eligible households across the state, and getting you the data that you need, to meet the requirements for CETA, and also, helping to ensure affordability for energy for our low-income and vulnerable populations in the state. And so also, thank you to Commerce, Annika, Annalyn, for both of you for doing the tech support on this. Look forward to future conversations throughout this year as CETA rolls out, and just encourage you all to reach out to the agencies in your communities if you haven't, and talk a little bit about what opportunities may be available to you. And with that, I want to thank everybody. Have a great afternoon, and see you all next time.